Hi everyone, and welcome back to Crochet Tutorials. In this video we're going to do the granny square. It is such a staple in crochet, and a lot of the techniques that are more advanced techniques are based on what you do in your granny square. It is, maybe you might think it's a little old-fashioned or you're only doing it for a practice, but these are wonderful to make blankets with. Using the square or continuing into a continuous granny square blanket. The reason that they're so good is because they're actually quite economical yarn wise, and they are lightweight for a blanket of comparable size that would have solid stitches throughout the whole blanket. They do get quite heavy, so these are a really good option for a lighter weight blanket. And when I say weight, I don't mean less warmth. The granny square blankets are quite warm, but they're not as heavy, physically heavy to pick up. So, and that's because of all these wonderful little gaps that conserve yarn and thereby conserve weight. So this is the granny square. We're going to make this one just a continuous colour with one colour change. Obviously you apply the colour change technique to something when you make it colour changing every row. The reason I want to make this one with you is because this is the easiest way to explain how not to make them twisted. Sometimes you'll see granny squares and they kind of twist off centre as they get bigger, and there's a reason that happens, so I'll show you how to avoid that in this video. Alright, let's get started. Alrighty, so to make this square we do need a couple of things. We need some yarn. This is a 10 ply acrylic. It's a worsted weight yarn, so I like that. It does tend to make a larger square with the same amount of stitches and the same amount of rows. You know, you could obviously use an 8 ply, but you will get a smaller square than this. Probably with an 8 ply your square would be about that big. I have my crochet hook. It is a 5mm hook. It is a great size to use with the 10 ply because it does create these nice tight little stitches in the square. I have my darning needle to darn in the ends and my pair of scissors. So I'll just put those aside. Essentially what we're going to need to do to begin this square, as you can see, if I just zoom in on it a little bit, you can see that the square actually has a central hole and then these 4 clusters around that central hole. So ignore everything else. These 4 clusters are your starting point for your granny square. And, you know, they... I guess as you go through other granny squares, they can look different. You can have different arrangements of those, but most of them will have these 4 clusters. They are called clusters because they contain 3 double crochets within each. So we've got altogether 12 stitches in this central piece, not including the ring that is in the middle that we'll make in a second. But when we put in a cluster, we need to chain between them to get these gaps in the corner here. So we'll have a look at that, but this is what we'll be making first. And to do that, we need to make a ring to crochet into. So take your yarn, I'll just zoom out a tiny bit. Take your yarn, and to make a slip knot, we need to just wrap it around our finger and then pop it in underneath and sort of grab it. Make a little U with the yarn underneath, grab it and pull it tight. There are many ways of making a slip knot, and if that's not how you do it, then don't worry, just do it your way. Then we need to chain 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. That is how many chains are in the ring normally for a granny square. You can do 4, but it will give you a smaller hole in the middle. This hole size kind of matches the rest, so if you chain 5 you'll have the same size hole. And then you slip stitch into the first chain. Now, so this one on your hook doesn't count as a chain at all. This is the first chain from the slip stitch. So that's this one here. We just need to pop the hook in, yarn over, pull that yarn through, and then pull through the loop on your hook. And you'll see what we end up with. Let's take that hook out. What we end up with is this little ring. Zoom in. And you might get a bit confused because the slip stitch kind of makes another hole in the top there. You can see that one. And then there's this larger hole in the bottom. This larger hole in the bottom is our target hole for our stitches. So we're going to, from there, we're going to chain 3. So 1, oh, hang on. I wasn't even in the camera then. Just zoom out a bit. So I've chained 1, 2, 3. And then we are going to put 2 more double crochets into this hole. So we yarn over, we go into the ring, we come up, we grab that yarn, bring it up through the ring. We've got 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So that's 1 double crochet and a chain 3, and then we yarn over and go back into the ring, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Now in most instances when you chain up 3 to get to the height of a double crochet, it does count as a stitch. So in this case as well it does. So we have 3 of our double crochets and that is our cluster. So after that we're going to chain 2 and that forms our first corner, and every time we make a corner we will be chaining 2. Then just yarn over and go straight back into the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Make 1 more double crochet, and we need 3 in our cluster, so we need to do that 2 more times. That's 2 and then 3. You heard that honk? That is a train honking in the background. So we have 2 clusters that are separated by a chain 2 at the moment. And we're going to chain 2 again, and then we are going to do the same, another cluster into that ring. So into the ring, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And we're going to do it 2 more times. And 3. So that is our third part of that central ring. Now it only takes 1 more cluster to complete it, but we need to chain 2. Every time we do a corner, we chain 2 between the clusters. And now we need 1 more cluster of 3. So another double crochet, yarn over, into the ring, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And yarn over into the ring, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over into the ring, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So at the moment we've got 1 cluster, a chain space, a cluster, a chain space, a cluster and another chain space. We need to chain 2 here and then join to the top of that first chain 3 we did. So you can see 1, 2, 3 chains. We need to join into the third. So we just pop our hook through there and then grab the yarn and pull through and through the loop on the hook to do a slip stitch. And that is the beginning of a granny square. And you might need to just move all these around so they look more centered, but it must have 3 double crochets in each cluster and have 4 of those clusters for your central square. And then of course we've got our chain 2s in the corner. So that is the beginning, and it's really, once you get it, you understand it, but until then it might be a little bit tricky, but as long as you do that, you'll be fine. So now where do we go from here? What I like to do is chain 3 to get a double crochet and then turn the work over. And so we've got the tail hanging out here. And so this is a corner. And we know we have to work a corner, which is going to be a chain 2. But to do that, we need 2 clusters of 3 double crochets in each cluster. And that's going to be the case for the rest. Oh, it might be easier to see on this one actually. Going to be the case for the rest of the work. So you can see here we've made our 4. But then these ones is the round we're on now, and they are in the corners. They're in the corners of that square. So we've got 2 clusters in each corner, and you can see that that spreads across that way and across that way. They're the corners. And then these other ones, they're just single clusters because they just form the sides. But in the corners, every time we will make 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into that one space. All right, so let's do it. So we've turned our work. We're working on the wrong side essentially, but you won't know the difference once it's finished. We've got a chain 3, so then we need a double crochet into that chain space there. And then another double crochet into there. Pull through 2, pull through 2. Then we are going to chain 2 because that's the rule, and yarn over and make another cluster of 3 into that same space. Now don't worry if you're not keeping up with me doing that there. I'm going to pause here and let you do that. If you need to go back or rework how to do that beginning corner, then feel free to rewind the video. But this is our first corner. We're going to put that in each of these. Okay, so once we have that corner piece in, the 3 double crochets, the chain 2 and the 3 double crochets, we're going to chain 1. And the reason we chain 1 is because anytime we're over a crochet, we only need to chain 1, and that's because of the sort of fanned body of the clusters. You'll see what I mean in just a second, but every time you're on a side, only chain 1. In a corner, you chain 2. So then from that chain 1, we go straight into doing another corner, which is 3 double crochet. So that's 1, 2, and 3, and a chain 2 because that's the rule. Now we need to do another 3 double crochets into that same space. 2 and 3. Okay, so now we've got 2 corners and a chain 1 space here. So we'll chain 1 again, and then we need to work our 3rd corner. So again, just 3 double crochet, double crochet, a chain 2, and 3 more double crochet, all into the one space. And granny squares are beautiful because you're working into spaces all the time instead of working into the tops of stitches like with some other types of crochet. So again, we're on a side, we're hovering over a cluster, so we're only going to chain one, and then we have our last corner, so we need to work our corner into there, which is 3 double crochets, 2 and 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and then 3 more double crochets. 2 and 3. So at this point we are above a cluster, so we need to chain 1, and then we're going to attach once more to the top of that chain 3 that we did initially. So we just attach with a slip stitch into the top of that chain, and we have finished that round. Now, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between front and back once you have your ends woven in. Okay, if you are still with me and you have something that looks like this, ignore the tail, you have something that looks like this with 4 clusters in the middle and then 4 sets of 2 clusters with chain 2 spaces between them, then you are doing fabulously. Well done. It is a tricky thing to do initially. So we're going to put in round 3, and there's a trick to this because I mentioned earlier that we don't want it to sort of start moving off to the left to get off center. What we want to do is keep all those clusters centered around this middle piece. So the trick to that is actually to turn your work like we did earlier. But again, you can see where we've ended here on that. It's kind of above this double crochet here, and we don't want that. We actually want to be in this next chain space. So to do that, what we're going to do is turn, and then we're going to just slip stitch. So put your hook into that space, grab the yarn, bring it through, and pull it straight through that loop on your hook. And now we're directly above that chain space. So then we can continue. Chain 3, and again put your cluster in. Remember that this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, so we're going to need 2 more double crochets. So yarn over, go into the space, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. And 1 more double crochet, yarn over, into the space, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So that is our first cluster. Now our next cluster, or our next thing we're going to do, is hover above this cluster here. So we're chaining 1, and then we need to work our first corner. So that's 3 double crochets, 1, 2 and 3 double crochets, separated by a chain 2, and then 3 more. They're not separated by a chain 2, it's followed by a chain 2, isn't it? So that's 1, 2 and 3. So we've made our first corner. Then we're hovering over another single cluster, so we need to chain 1 and work a single cluster into this chain 1 space here. So we're going to do 3 double crochets, 1, 2 and 3, and then we're chaining 1 again because we're over a cluster, and we need to work into our corner. So 3 double crochets, 1, 2 and 3, chain 2 and 3 more double crochets into that same chain 2 space. 2 and 3. So again, we're over a cluster, we chain 1 and we need to work a cluster into this chain 1 space. So that is 3 double crochets, 2 and 3, and then we chain 1 because we're over a cluster and go into the corner again, 3 double crochets, 2 and 3. Now if at any time you need to pause the video, feel free to do so or rewind, but at the moment we're working our corner, so we need a chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. 1, 2 and 3. Oh, 3. Okay. Now again, we're over a cluster. You know it, it's chain 1, and we need to work one single cluster into this chain 1 space. So 3 double crochets, 2 and 3. Again, we are over a cluster, chain 1, and we've got to work our final corner. 1, 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 more double crochets in that same space. 2 and 3. Chain 1 because we're over a cluster, and finally we get to join from where we started. Again, it's a chain 3, it always will be, so we're going to pop straight into the top of that chain 3 and slip stitch to join. Now that is what you should have. Now don't worry if it's looking a bit wonky or out of shape. Certainly at this stage it might be. That's perfectly fine, as long as you have a central point here with 4 clusters, and then you're spreading out with your corners of 2 clusters with a chain 2 space between them. You'll be doing fine. So we're going to the next round, and again we're going to want to not be immediately over that double crochet that we have there. We want to be in a chain space. This chain space is quite a fair way away. We don't want to have to slip stitch all the way over to there. So we're going to go into this one, which requires us to turn our work. And turning the work helps stop that crazy wobble that we get sometimes with granny squares. So again, we're chaining 3 and putting in our cluster in here. So 3 or 2 more double crochets in here, because we have a chain 3 and 2 double crochets. That's our cluster. Chain 1 because we're over a cluster, and then work our corner of 2 clusters, 1, 2, 3 double crochets, chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. Okay. So we're over a cluster, we chain 1, we need a single cluster into this chain 1 space. That's just 3 double crochets, 1, 2 and 3. Chain 1 again, a single cluster again, 1, 2 and 3. we chain 1 again, and we're working into our corner. So it's a cluster, 1, 2, and 3, followed by a chain 2 space and another cluster. 1, 2, and 3. We're over a cluster again, so we need to chain 1, make a single cluster into this chain 1 space, chain 1 again, make another cluster into this chain 1 space, chain 1 again, and work our next corner. Now you know what it is. 3 double crochets, separated or followed by a chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. 2 and 3. Chain 1, single cluster, chain 1, single cluster, 2, 3, chain 1, and work our corner. So obviously, the more that this grows, the more you will have to do those single clusters in the chain 1 spaces. The further it will be between your corners. But at this stage, when it's small like this, you know, the corners come up very regularly. Okay, so that is our last corner, and we're only working to here. So we need to chain 1, do this final single cluster in this chain 1 space. Oh, the trains are getting honky tonight. 2, 3, chain 1 and slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that you did when we started the round. And this is what you have. You can turn it over. There should be no real difference between the front and the back of this. The only difference at the moment is that there's a tail hanging out there. There is no real difference. It's just the same front and back. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. How many have I got in here? I think that's the same size as that, isn't it? Yes. So it's time to change colour. Now, what I'm going to do, actually, because I've got a few of these particular squares, what I'm going to do in another video is do a joining tutorial of how to join these with the same stitch. But for now, we've only got 3. We're making one right now. So how to tie off? Well, remembering that if you make, hang on, I'll come out a little bit. If you make a really multicoloured one like this, which is fantastic, and you can make as many colours as you like, and you can have all different coloured squares in your blanket, it looks absolutely marvellous. You are going to have ends everywhere. Every time you join another colour on, there's a tail, and then there's your cut off tail as well. So there's 2 ends for every colour, and they all need to be woven in so you can't see them anywhere. That's what we'll do with this. What we've done is slip stitched into there. So we need to just chain and pull that chain through. Let go of that. Pull that chain through. Give yourself a decent tail. It needs to be longer than your darning needle because you need to be able to turn it to get it into the stitches. So just cut it off, pull that one out, and then pull that knot tight. We'll leave him there for the moment, and I will grab my other colour. This silver grey just goes beautifully with this teal, so you can be using whatever colour you like. What we're going to do is just make another slip knot. So as you would to start, make your slip knot, pop it on your hook, and then I don't like to join in this same space that I just came out of. I actually, for some bizarre reason, my preference is to join in the space next to a corner. I don't like joining in corners. That's just me. So pop the tail and your working yarn over the back, and then put your hook in with the slip knot on it, and grab that yarn and just pass it through the loop on your hook. And that's a slip stitch join. So people will say all sorts of varying ways to join your next colour yarn on, and they're all great. I prefer this one because it's quite solid. Anyway, whatever way you choose to join on your colour, and just chain 3. And then work your normal cluster, so normal single cluster, into that chain 1 space. And then we're going to chain 1 again and work our corner into this corner space here. So yarning over and beginning with a cluster of 3 double crochet. And then chain 2, and then 3 more double crochet. Then chain 1 because we're over a cluster, and another cluster into that space. Now I'm not going to bore you with making you watch me do all of this. So what we'll do is I can meet you at this point here. But remember, every time you are over a cluster, you need to chain 1. And every time you're between 2 clusters, not in a corner, every time you're between 2 clusters, it's only 1 cluster of 3. And in your corners, you need the cluster of 3, the chain 2 space, and the cluster of 3. So I'll meet you back at around this corner here, and this last corner here, and we'll see how you've gone. Okay, we're back just at this last corner here. So we've done all of our clusters all the way around with chain 1s between them. We've worked our corners, and now we need to work this final corner. I've chained 1, and we need to put in this final cluster. So that's 3 double crochets. Obviously, I know you know that because you've gotten all this way. And a chain 2 and 3 more double crochets. A chain 1, a single cluster, a chain 1, our final single cluster, a chain 1, and a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3 where we started. And that is our square. Now to tie off, we obviously just chain the way we did in the last colour, pull it through, give ourselves a decent length, and snip that, pull that working yarn away, and pull that knot down. Now I should say, there are people who, when you change colour like this, There are people who will say, oh, there's a knot there that's going over, so I'm just going to wiggle that. There's people who'll say, lay it across your work and then crochet over it. And that's great if your crochet work is really quite dense. If it's not, like in the case of the granny stitch or the granny square or the granny stripe, what will happen is your work will end up pulling back through. So, you know, the blanket will get tugged on like this, and these things will slowly start to creep back through these stitches. So there is nothing else to it except you need to darn these edges in. I'm just going to zoom in on that. So we'll start with our first one. I can pretty much guarantee these will not come loose if you do it this way. So the one in the middle is really easy. Okay, we've got these lovely straight pieces of stitch that go all into the middle. So we've got our yarn on the needle, and all we need to do, don't go in where it comes out, go into the next piece and just push your needle in around a few of those and pass it through. And then come back, so not where you came out, just go in just prior to that and go through a few more than that, Kim, and come out again. And then we're going to pass it back through one more time. So not where we came out, just in front of that, and just pass it through a few like that. And then you can cut that one off. If you do that, that will not come loose. So we've got a couple of other ends here that don't sit neatly in a ring like that. What do we do with those? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is essentially the same thing, except we have to get to that point where we've got, it might be easier to see on these ones, those lovely straight lines there. So again, we've got our yarn on the needle. I tend to just go down, sort of grab individual strands of yarn and go in like this, get in there, and down onto this piece, go under that one and come out. So now we're at that level. And then we're going to go, because we came out under that, we're going to go in under this one in front. And we're doing exactly the same thing as we did down there on the ring, but we're doing it up here on these stitches. Just go through a couple, and then you can go back through. I sincerely hope you can't hear that glooping in the background. That is my dog licking himself. Cut that off. Never work with kids and dogs, hey? All right, so we've got a couple more ends here. So I'll just show you that again on this grey one. We don't want to go... Oh, actually, that's the knot there, so that's absolutely fine. So go right in under these. Go all the way to the end. We don't want to go into the teal because obviously that'd be really quite visible. And then come back in, a couple of stitches in front. And then you can actually go back under where you first went. And that is your solid weave of an end. If you always weave in your ends this way, you'll literally have no problems. You know, people will give you all sorts of crazy methods for weaving in your ends, but it's one of those unfortunately essential things when you change colour, which is why when you change colour a gajillion times like this, it can become a little bit tiresome. All right, so again, we're going to just go down into the stitch and come out close to those vertical lines of the bottom of the stitch, and then go in under them come out the other side, across the front here, and then we can go all the way back under the way we did the first time, because we've just done it differently that second time. Doing it 3 times, that's your best bet. So if your square is out of shape, then that's what people will talk about blocking. You get a particular thing and hold your corners out so it keeps the, because this one's a bit curly. I don't know if you can see that that's curly. Anyway, we can talk about that in another video, but that is your square. And if you have a square, well done. If you got confused, feel free to rewind it and start from the beginning. These are wonderful building blocks for crochet. You can end up making tops out of them, bags, blankets, scarves. Don't know about a beanie, maybe a beanie, but all sorts of things, toys. You know, this is a wonderful building block. So congratulations if you produced a square. If you didn't, keep at it. Follow the instructions. Make sure you've got the 4 in the middle, 3 double crochets in each cluster, 4 clusters, chain 2 between them, and you're always chaining 2 in your corners. Okay, I do believe that's it. So hopefully I shall see you in the next video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and set those notifications to all by clicking on that little bell icon. That'll set notifications to all, and you'll be notified anytime I upload. All right, thank you so much for being with me. I shall see you next time. Bye now.